Welcome, everyone. This is Jim Sporer with ISSIP, the International Society of Service Innovation Professionals, and it's a great pleasure to have a colleague and friend, Bob Kozma, on. And Bob wrote a LinkedIn post that I saw several ISSIP colleagues, including our ISSIP fellow, Ray Fisk, liked immediately. And I'm going to call it the Kozma test because Bob wrote this amazingly short but well thought through LinkedIn article about AI and the Turing test and what would be a better test for the future. And as we prepare for our transformation of the financial sector, nothing could be more important in my mind than ending poverty. And that was the focus of Bob's work. Bob is also an author. He spent most of his career in the education industry, but he's a broad systems thinker like many of us in the ISIP community. And Bob, if you could just introduce yourself and maybe take us through a little bit of your book and this blog post you wrote, that would be fantastic preparation for
Sure,
the panel that's coming up.
sure. I appreciate it, Jim. I do want to apologize for my appearance. You kind of caught me off guard on this, but you reassured me that it isn't an issue with the group that we're talking to. So I welcome the opportunity to talk to everyone today, and especially with you. So I've been looking forward to this. Hold on just a second. Sorry, I had to decline a phone call. Okay, well, gee, where to start? I guess I could start way back at the
Yes.
beginning, or not quite. But I've always thought of myself as a designer, and always been interested in technology. Now, where that gets you is another matter, but where it got me was actually into teaching. Um, I started off my degree in aeronautical engineering. I wanted to be a spaceman, but ended up in political science, and where a poli-sci degree gets you is another matter. And kind of looking around, I ended up going into teaching, and I was a grade school teacher in the inner city of Detroit for 4 years at the beginning of my career. And during that time went on and got a master's and a PhD in education and technology. But I'd always approached education as a fundamentally a design profession. That is, and of course, the book that I wrote that you referred to is How to Make the World a Better Place, Design with Passion, Purpose, and Values. And how I define design, actually, how Herb Simon defines design, which is what I piggyback on, is getting from a current state to a desired state. And what's the process of doing that? So design is a process of basically solving problems, of making the world better. So as I kind of played all this out in the book, it kind of took me back through my career. So with a PhD in education technology, I ended up as a professor at the University of Michigan and was there for 20 years. And then took a position at SRI in Silicon Valley, which used to be called Stanford Research Institute, and then it broke away from the university, and it's just a major R&D institute, and Silicon Valley has a long history of being involved in the development of the internet and a number of other kind of groundbreaking innovations. And I headed up a center there for technology and learning. And much of my research was on the impact of technology on kids and teachers and schools. And in 2002, after kind of an extended research career, I decided to try and do something a bit more impactful than publishing academic articles. So I did consulting for about 12 years. and it was primarily international consulting. At the time, a lot of ministries of education were trying to figure out what to do with computers. They were all over the place except in schools. And so I worked with ministries of education and agencies and industries that were targeting education. So I did a lot of work for Intel, Cisco, Microsoft, um, and they would hire me to consult with ministries of education. I did a lot of work with UNESCO and OECD. So my focus was on education and technology, but I began to realize as I worked with ministries of education that this was a much bigger thing than just how teachers were using technology in their class. And it had much more to do at that level with uh, the impact of technology and education more generally on socioeconomic development. Um, so I had to step back and take a much broader view of what I was doing and what I was consulting on and how education and more specifically technology fit into this broader picture, how technology could change education and how changed education could impact society and the economy. And I consulted,
I'll
sure,
just
yeah,
interrupt for 1 minute to add that, in the ISIP community, the service innovation community, that's exactly what we think about is how these systems are interconnected. And education, of course, is a very, very fundamental one because it deals with the human capabilities and skills, but it touches every other aspect of how you design systems in society across the whole
exactly.
spectrum. So continue.
Exactly. And I really push myself to try and kind of look at the range of situations that people are dealing with. So I did pro bono work with rural villages in East Africa, looking at the most basic kinds of technology that they might have access to or could develop access to, and how that could improve education in these rural villages, or for that matter, how it could position them better in the economy. And one of my principal clients, I worked with the Ministry of Education in Singapore for 7, 8 years on their technology master plan and educate master plans. They had a whole series of them that I worked with them on. And there, Singapore is just a very special and unusual place. It would be very difficult to replicate this in any place else for a number of reasons. But I mean, there are important lessons to be learned from them, and one of them was, uh, as you mentioned, the centrality of education in the whole scheme of things. Education is very important in Singapore, and it's very much connected to their economic policy. So the Ministry of Education, the Minister of Education, and the Finance Minister set on the kind of central a governing body with the Prime Minister as the head that lays out the big master plan for development in Singapore. And I felt I should have been paying them. That I learned so much from working with them. But so I came away. Pardon? I think you're muted.
I was going to say, I just want to share my screen for 1 minute, Bob, so that I can
Sure.
show your book here, Make the World a Better Place. I just want to give people a little bit of context for that. And
Well,
then
thank you for the
apologize.
plug.
And I also want to say that as fundamental as education is, because it deals with people, there are other sectors as well, like finance, where you're investing in everything that's changing, right? How do you invest?
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
education is essential, finance is essential. And I interrupted you just as you were talking about how you were in Singapore talking to both education and the finance folks. So please continue.
Well, I wasn't so much talking to the finance people actually, but I did talk with the Minister of Education, and it's interesting to get the perspective from Singapore because they on these international tests they always score at the top internationally, and I asked him why he thought that was the case, and he said, "Well, it's not that their students are better at the top end than our students." He said that for the most part, our students, our best students score as well or better than their best students. It's really everybody else. And he said, because Singapore is such a small country, um, they have to have everybody firing on all cylinders in order to be a competitive economy in the international scene.
Hmm.
So for them, it's just as important, or even more important, to get the students in the second, third, fourth quartile performing as best they can. And he
Hmm.
said that's where they outperform the rest of
Hmm.
certainly the US and the rest of the world, is that they really focus on making sure that the even the lowest performing student increases or improves their performance and their learning. So
Interesting.
as I say, I should have been paying them.
That's a great insight. That's a great insight. So tell us a little bit about this LinkedIn post, if you can make that transition somehow.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I've stayed on top of the technology, even though I've retired from consulting, in part because it's always been an interest of mine, and in part because it has such a profound impact on society in so many ways. And I've along with everybody else, just been amazed at what GTP can do, and especially after kind of the AI winter, where all of us were kind of like, "What is this all about?" And then boom, kind of seemingly out of nowhere, it's doing these amazing things. And then kind of bringing that into this kind of broader perspective of, wait, what impact could it have? Um, and of course, as you point out, all part of the system. It's not technology by itself. It's how it interacts with all of these other parts. And so it's kind of that's been my focus, is like, wait a minute, okay, we've got this incredible capability that's going to get even more capable over the next few years. Um, how is that going to interact with all of these other parts? And it the biggest impact I think it could have is on our economy and on our government. Um, and um, and by government, I mean small g, governance. How it is that we can be more involved in improving our situation, improving our well-being, and how it is that it can impact the economy, um, and particularly how it could actually exacerbate the problems that we have right now. When, on the other hand, it could actually minimize or reduce or mitigate some of the problems that we have right now. How do we address this new potential in a way that can really end poverty rather than just increase the number of millionaires that we have in the country? So that was kind of the thinking that I was going through when I wrote this. Is that the Turing test, which clearly we've covered that with chat, um, is a pretty low bar in retrospect. At the time, of course, in 1950, when Turing was writing and thinking, it was something that who could ever think it would be achieved. Now kind of sounding like humans interacting is kind of pretty small threshold. So what, I mean, if this technology is as big as people say it's going to be, is, and will be in the future, let's be more aspirational in the test of how intelligent it might be, and see if it can solve some of the problems that we haven't been very good at solving ourselves. Then it would really be intelligent.
I think
So
so.
that's kind of where I came from on that.
That's great. And I'm going to make sure to include the link to your LinkedIn post as well as
Oh, great.
the
Thank
book
you.
and the YouTube, this short little interview when I post it, so people can find those easily when they're listening to this. And Bob, I just want to thank you. I know you're very busy. You've got a huge amount of experience, but your insights every once in a while just sparkle so much.
Oh, well, I appreciate that. Thank you, Jim.
I want to thank you, and I'll go ahead and stop the recording, and we can chat just a little bit more.
Super.
Let me stop the recording here. Okay, there. Okay.